clock on the wall tells us it's time for another episode of Learn, Teach, Lead, where we explore how educators, just like you, are using innovative instructional strategies, including how to leverage AI to improve teaching and learning.
Each week, we share real classroom stories, tools, and tips to help you save time, personalize instruction, and lead with confidence.
I'm Janine Nostrom, an elementary school principal.
And I'm Robin D'Angelo, an elementary school teacher. Let's get started with today's Friday debrief.
Right. Well, I always love starting the Friday debrief with the win of the week. And it's been quite a week, Robin. So why don't you go ahead with your win? I think I've had more grows than glows this week.
Well, I certainly had a glow yesterday. I always hear teachers, talking about how they love to reward students with different, prizes and, different things for, their great work and behavior in class. And it gets expensive sometimes when you're getting stickers and little, fidgets and things like that. But truthfully, the best reward that I feel that you could give, and I did this yesterday, was your presence. Your presence is the present that you give your kids, because yesterday they were so excited over Halloween. We had a bingo game at our class party and they won lunch bunch with Miss D'Angelo. So I told them they can invite one of their friends, and we all came together yesterday and we had lunch and we made friendship bracelets. And it was just such a wonderful event just to sit down, because, the day is so hectic and crazy. You sometimes don't just get to sit down and talk to your students. So it was just a really nice time that we spent together. It did not cost me anything except for my time, and it was well worth it. And my students really left happy and excited. And I actually heard one of them say, this is like the best day. We had gym and lunch bunch. Oh. So I'm right up there with phys ed now.
Oh, very nice.
So it was just a really great way to reward your students. And, they love it. And it's cheap. It doesn't cost you anything, but it's impactful.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, so you just inspired my fabulous moment of the week. I was reminded as you were talking about another low-cost prize for the mathathon. Some of the students were working towards, different levels and prizes, and one of the prizes was to do the morning announcements. As you know, I make the morning announcements every morning. We say the same thing. We do the birthdays, the joke of the day, and whatnot. And it was just so much fun to have all these different students come in. They were so excited to speak over the loudspeaker. It was really funny that I didn't have to teach them my opening announcement because they all have it memorized. So even the kindergartners, they didn't need any prompting. They were able to do the morning announcements. It was just a lot of fun, a fun way to start the day. And now I have 90 kids asking me, when can I make the announcement? I'm like, you have to earn it. You have to earn it as a prize. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. But let's go on to today's topic, because I actually wanted to talk about this a little bit. I think it's an important topic to share. I got a call from a colleague this week who asked me a really thoughtful question. And the question was about how our ICE-T method, the writing method that we have been using, fits into our district's philosophy for writing workshop. And, we have talked about this a lot. How does what we're doing align with our curriculum and align with the writing workshop model that we have? And, you and I are very sold on this ICE-T method because we've seen the results, but we do have an obligation and a commitment to fulfill, the instructional practices that are required by the district. And in this case, it's our curriculum, obviously, and the writing workshop. So we were talking about that at length. And I really think it would be a good idea for us to kind of unpack how we see something like this fitting into the structure of a writing workshop. So, the first thing that came to mind whenever I think about writing workshop, I know it's oversimplified. So everyone forgive me for oversimplifying. But for me, the workshop model, whether it's writing, reading, whatever, it's an I do, we do, you do, and then a share of some kind, right? Like essentially that's what it is. And there's always some explicit modeling, that's your I do. There's always some guided practice, that's the we do, and then some independent practice, the you do, and the share is your conferring. And I really think that our students do learn best in this model. They need to learn to write by watching and hearing writers think. As soon as we were talking about that, I instantly thought of the iced tea model because that's what we're doing. We're teaching them to think about how writers go through the writing process, right? They have to think about what their claim is. They have to then, support that claim with evidence from the text and put it into their own words. The difference is that our way does sometimes supply them with the language, right? We use sentence starters in the beginning, but we don't use sentence starters all the time. We don't require them. It's just scaffolded to get them started. So I was curious to hear about your perspective on, is the iced tea model aligned with writing workshop? And if so, in what ways? And how, as a teacher of writing, do you fit this into your writing workshop? And, maybe we could just start there. I think teachers might find that helpful, especially teachers in our district who might be interested in trying this, but still want to maintain fidelity to our curriculum.
Yeah, of course. And you know what? That's a great point. And every day we are, we that's our goal. We follow our curriculum, we follow our state standards. And I think of these methods, these thinking strategies, these planning strategies, like our iced tea and our BMMME, which has been here for a long time. BMMME for narrative writing. We kind of enhanced it with that that thought action dialogue, how we learn through school, but we called it be it, body language, expression, internal thinking, feeling, and these thinking strategies for me don't take away from writer's workshop. They enhance writer's workshop by scaffolding how the students are thinking.
Right.
Right. So when you're teaching a student, let's take a literary analysis, to think of a topic, you're when you teach this, you're teaching it the I do. So we've done a lot of this together. Now, yes, we do start with some sentence starters, but then I think to myself, but also first, next, then, last, finally are sentence starters too. They're transition words that we use, right? And they help guide a student's thinking. So for the iced tea method, giving them some simple thinking sentences to start with, like, I know this because, has been around forever. Like we always say, well, explain your answer, use the because statement. We just kind of put it in a planning strategy or a thinking strategy. Now I call it in fourth grade because they now just kind of say it when they're speaking to me and speak in this thinking cohesive strategy because
Right.
they've learned it in third grade. But it's not, we didn't reinvent the wheel. What we did was we organized the wheel
Mm-hmm.
to fit the students' thinking based on their data and how they needed to organize their thoughts to then put it into a cohesive piece of writing or create a story with it.
Absolutely. And as you were saying that, like this whole idea of helping organize for them, really from like a cognitive science perspective, these are just like very structured thinking routines. And the intention here is to lighten the mental load for them as young writers, right? Like if you think about cognitive load theory, okay, so when students are, busy, I guess, feeling overwhelmed by figuring out the structure of the task, because in the writing workshop, they do have to spend a lot of time trying to like discern what's the structure of this. Well, if they don't have a firm grasp of the structure, then they can't really access the deeper thinking that is required for, making that deep literary analysis or, digging into craft to be more expressive in your writing. So again, I think there's some value to having kids try and like determine the structure, but I also think there's some real value in just telling them what the structure is and teaching it to them in a very clear way to reduce that extraneous load. So they're like, they have more mental energy, I guess is maybe a good way of saying it, for interpretation or clarity or craft. And, to think about the meaning of something, to put something into their own words. So, in my opinion, this structure that we've created doesn't really limit creativity. In fact, I think it supports or maybe even enables it. And again, the other piece I was thinking of is the idea that, we've seen it over and over again in your class, this the independence that they gain. Now, one of the most important parts of any workshop is the independent work time, right? Like a lot of teachers um, spend a long time learning how do I manage the independent work in a workshop when every kid is working on something on their own. Well, in a well managed workshop classroom, the scaffolds you're using will fade so the kids can become independent. That's what happens with our iced tea. That scaffold eventually fades and just becomes part of what they do. So they've internalized it, and now they don't need that acronym any longer because they understand the structure of the literary essay. They understand the structure of the paragraph and they know where they're going with it. So again, it's not really formulaic writing, it's a scaffold that they can use to organize their thinking, and being able to transfer what they know from one task to another. Again, like that transference shows us that they've got it. It's the hallmark of authentic learning, right? If I can do it in one situation and I really know it, I can apply it in another situation. So yeah, so that was just another thought I had about how it kind of dovetails with the workshop.
Yeah, and writer's workshop is a lot of scaffolding. And it's a lot of inquiry as well, right? We're teaching students to be critical thinkers, but we're scaffolding it. So when we model it, you know, we model it in a structured way for them so that they understand in their brain how to be critical thinkers, and it saves that time of they don't know where to start, right? So I always tell them it's like a house without a foundation. If you don't have a foundation, the house is going to fall down. These are just, again, ways that we've been thinking about writing for a long time. Thought, action, dialogue, um, you know, show, not tell. But those skills sometimes don't get transferred over so much from grade to grade.
Right.
But we've also discovered that when you use an acronym, even though TAD is an acronym, but when you use an acronym built into the writing process,
Mm-hmm.
it's transferable because it sticks in a student's mind.
Right.
So did we reinvent the show not tell? No, we just call it something different that the kids can now transfer over. We're giving them a structure to start with in order to use it as a thinking process to organize where they have to go and where they have to start to go to the next step. And I have to tell you, I went from third to fourth grade, and I'm looking at the curriculum, right? So in the curriculum in third grade, we have to identify different things. We have to grow ideas about characters. We have to track how they change, how something changes from one book to another book, or how a character changes from the beginning to the end, right? And that iced tea helps them make that transfer of information logically in their head. And then when we get to fourth grade, our curriculum gets even deeper with research across multiple texts, determining why something is important, paraphrasing it. And when they seem to have that structure, it takes the guesswork out, but it also teaches them to critically think in an organized way. And I think that's the piece that, some students need help with, organizing their thoughts. Sometimes I need help with organizing my thoughts.
Yeah.
That's why we make lists. That's why we have bullets,
Right.
box and bullets, we use box and bullets to plan. It's just another way of this thinking strategy or this planning strategy to help students scaffold their thinking. They're seeing us model it. we're doing it together, and then they're doing it. That's the we do, and then we share it out as a class. And I have to tell you, from going from third to fourth grade doing this, the students are saying these parts of this iced tea,
Yep.
but not exactly anymore.
Right.
Now they're not relying on the sentence starters. However, what did not leave is the organization in their brain. They still have that organization, but they don't have that crutch of that I know this because, or this means that, or this shows that. Will they use it sometimes? Yes. But how are they finding other words now to use for that? Yes. But there's still, it's that we modeled it, we did it together, and now they're finding that independence where they're becoming critical thinkers.
Right.
They still have that piece of that thinking in their brain to help them become that critical thinker.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, I was thinking, you're talking about going from third grade to fourth grade and how they're moving from using this, relying very heavily on this structure to just having it internalized. So again, I don't think that the iced tea structure is like some formula. It's not really a formula. It's more of a bridge, right? It's bridging from dependence to independence. It's bridging from I don't even know where to begin to, yeah, I know how to approach this writing task, right? Like I have that internally. So I just think it's a helpful tool for teachers that they can include as part of their workshop instruction. Now, to be honest, is it going to fit in a 5 to 10 minute mini lesson? Maybe not in the beginning, but it could. For example, you could just one day, hey writers, watch me as I develop a claim, right? And you can do it in small bites. We have found that um obviously we're chunking it out, but maybe a little bit longer lesson helps in the beginning. But then we're not spending an hour in teacher directed, everybody fill in your I on the graphic organizer, everybody fill in the C. That's really not what it's like. It fits very nicely into the graphic organizer. It fits, the graphic organizer fits really nicely into the workshop structure because it just becomes another tool for them to use. So I thought it was a great question, and one that is worth discussing. And I'd be curious to hear what other people think, or if other people are using any other kind of tool like this, and how it fits into their workshop.
Right. And I also will just say that, writer's workshop, and you can correct me on this, Ms. Nostrom, if I'm saying it incorrectly, but it's not just like, okay, here's your writing, figure it out.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
not the intention of writer's workshop. It's a gradual release from the teacher to the class to independence.
Right.
That's what writer's workshop is really meant to be. And that's really how we're teaching students to write. And using this scaffolded process is just a tool that we're using to help, to help gain that independence and help supply that support that the students need to scaffold that information in their brain. So it's not just, okay, let's go figure it out. We're intentionally scaffolding it for a gradual release, for a progression of writing.
So let me ask you some questions. For example, when you're teaching writing and you're introducing, let's say you're teaching literary analysis and you're using this ICECET method, right? You're doing a double sweet, comparison.
Yeah, making it sweeter.
Yeah. Do you have any explicit strategy instruction?
Of course.
Yeah. So
yes.
that's a hallmark of workshop instruction, right?
Right.
Do you have any notebook based thinking?
Of course. That's what the students are doing.
The notebooks are amazing. I mean, again, from looking at many writing notebooks, a lot of times, if you were to look in a student's writing notebook, there's not much there to work with in certain students, right? There's a lot of drawing, there's scribbling, there's half a sentence. It looks very, I get it, writing is messy, but when you're doing a literary analysis or research, maybe you want it a little more organized. So there's definitely notebook-based thinking. Is there conferring?
Of course, they
right?
talk to each other, they talk to me, we're talking as a group, right? So there's the I do, the we do.
They're also getting feedback because you're giving teacher feedback and AI generated personalized feedback. And so there's, the conferring, there's partner talk, and revision, right? Like all of these, all like anything you can think of basically that fits into the writing workshop, I think, is also accomplished as we go through this process. So I thought it was such a helpful question. I was glad it was asked because we had talked about it a little bit. I'm like, maybe we should just like talk it through because I don't want to supplant what the district is doing. I want to supplement and enhance, right?
Right.
And really giving us the opportunity to look closely at it. I think that, that was a good exercise for us, reminding us, and again, you had worked on curriculum over the summer. So you knew the curriculum very intimately. And if there was anything that didn't align, I think it would have come up in your curriculum work as well. So,
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, when I did the curriculum, it's so clearly aligned that it was just so easy to kind of, and again, it's a suggestion. It's not something
right.
that, says, oh, everybody has to do this. However, we found very good results with it. But, some people might find good results for their class with other, with other kind of planning methods and thinking strategies. But it fits so clearly into the curriculum that we put it in as one of the ways that students should plan for that literary analysis or that narrative that they're writing. And I just have to say one other thing. The reason that this became that we founded this at Ridge Ranch School was because it was based on the actual data that my students the actual work and data that my students that I was analyzing for my students. So it's exactly what I felt, little tweaks that they needed that I enhanced their curriculum with, which was so spot on because it came from what they needed based on analysis of data from both myself as well as AI. And as we move forward into this world of we don't know what's going to,
Mm-hmm.
happen in the next even month with AI and different kinds
Right.
of analysis tools, it's so helpful now that I can take this and give them these personalized pathways
Mm-hmm.
based on their independent work after we scaffold it, because they have that thinking strategy that they now are so used to that they can go right back in and reflect on their writing because they know the parts that they need to look at because they have a cohesive writing plan.
Right. And I think that we could, very easily assess the student's command and understanding of the structure of a literary essay by, asking them to provide feedback, right? Like, okay, now you create a personalized pathway for your friend's writing. You're going to read your friend's writing and go through, what the hallmarks of what should be in a literary essay, the characteristics, I should say, and now give your friend one suggestion in the format of a personalized pathway. That would be a good exercise for them
Right.
to do.
They always when I was in school and still now I think they use it in some schools. There was race, restate, analyze, cite, explain.
Right.
That's a planning strategy. Ice-T is introduce, cite, explain, tie back. So it's the same concept, but it's geared more toward what we felt our students needed in third and fourth grade in order to make them great writers and great thinkers coming in from the lower grades of elementary, where we needed to kind of hone in on some of those skills where that we needed to fill the gaps of curriculum and standards. So we wanted to make them thinkers, create critical thinkers. So we looked at their work, analyzed it, and gave them what they needed to be successful, just like any other kind of plan or thinking strategy that's out there, but it's more tailored toward what we see here at Ridge Ranch School. But I'm sure,
Right.
and you could name it iced tea, you could name it sweet tea, you can name it any acronym you
Yeah.
want.
Come
You
up
know,
with your own acronym.
it's just the idea of It's organized in a scaffolded, gradual release way that fits into writer's workshop, but it transfers from grade to grade and year to year because it's a catchy acronym that they understand how to organize their thoughts. And I have to tell you, I did an independent reading level assessment on one of the students today. And as they were telling me back the story, they were retelling. So when we test students to move up on the next reading level, we have them read a part of a story, and then they retell us what, for comprehension, what the story was about. They give us a summary. And I could see the student like kind of thinking, and I can see in his brain, I can't see, but I can tell like he's thinking, and he's like, told me the beginning of the story. It's like, and I know this because, when he started saying it, but it kept him on track, even thinking about a summary of a story. He kind of saw that model in his brain, like we often do with other things, in life. And we kind of keep that geared toward what we have to talk about. And that also will help them stay on topic.
Right, absolutely. So it's very interesting. It's also interesting when you think about the fact that we taught this format to mastery as well. So it wasn't like one day here's one format and here's another thing you might try and here's another thing you might try. Now again, I think it's good to give kids choices, but we made the decision to teach this to mastery, and I think it's yielded some good results. Now, if we had a student who we felt wasn't able to master this, we certainly would have or could have or would have modified it, right? So let's say a student is like, I'm just not getting this iced tea. We would have looked at what the student could do, where they needed to grow, and devise something else for that kid. But our experience so far has been that every kid has been able to master this, and to varying degrees. But every kid has internalized the structure. They know what to do and how to do it. And so therefore they're able to meet with success. And being transparent, one of our main goals was to pull up our test scores. So we looked at the NJSLA rubric, and we looked at our kids' writing, and we looked at the curriculum, and we're like, let's feed this all in and figure out what the missing piece is. And so I recommend that everyone does that. Take your data and run it through your favorite AI tool, and explain what your goals are for the students, and then get that organized information and look at it and talk about it with your very smart teachers and you can come up with your own acronym or approach. It was just a very enlightening experience from
It
beginning to
was.
end.
And it was over a 2-year span, might I add, over really 2 years where we were tweaking it. It wasn't perfect at first. We even were tweaking it. And throughout the entire process, we were looking at the curriculum and making sure that, if a student has to, give structure or tell about a main idea or detail, that's that I. If they have to cite evidence, that's going back and reading for comprehension. If they have to explain their evidence, that's supporting their reasoning through text evidence, which is clearly our goals in our curriculum. And T, reflecting on the lesson learned or reflecting on, a hope for the future or to tie back to the main idea. Those are all goals that are right in our curriculum, and that ICE-T scaffolds it so that those students can reach each one of those curriculum goals and standards.
Right. Well said. Okay, so we need to go on to our power move for the week. What do you think a good power move would be?
My power move is to take your curriculum goals and put them in an AI model, just your goals. So you might have 10 goals for grade 3 for literary analysis. Mm-hmm. Put the goals into a AI model and ask, and if you want to use the ICE-T, that's great. If you want to use your own thinking strategy or planning model, ask it to align your thinking strategy that you're using in your classroom to those curriculum goals and standards. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised to see how these are scaffolded enough and scaffolded so that the students can use them for mastery and success, and they go along with what you're teaching in your grade. And if not, revise it. Revise it so it fits into your curriculum and your your standards. Because I have to say, AI is really great at that.
Yes.
It's really great at organizing things and helping you as a thinking partner for a teacher to make sure that you have a differentiated strategy that your class will find success with. It's a really great, and they can take a lot of information. Like if I had to look at the 10 goals, I might sit there for the whole weekend, but they can take a lot of information and they can put it in and they can help you come up with what is right for your class with one of these kind of thinking strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. And my power move of the week just came to me while we were talking. So so if anybody tries it out, I'll be curious. But I would say think of the structures that you use in class to free up mental bandwidth for students, whatever structures you use to help students organize, and ask yourself if you see those students using those structures, do they know them to mastery? Can they use them across content areas? Do they use them without prompting, like you just shared? That student is now using this thinking structure, right? In when doing a retelling, when you're doing a reading level assessment. Like, how many of the structures that you have taught your students are you seeing them use to mastery throughout the day?
And just to piggyback off of you, speaking of mastery, we were on the carpet the other day and we were all sitting on the carpet. This was the share part of our writers workshop. And we all had to take our two articles that we were talking about for natural disasters in science. And we had to compare them. And how are those articles similar? And instead of saying, "Oh, let's write it again," because it was almost lunchtime and we didn't have the time, I said, let's just orally kind of speak it out. Like, how would we compare these? And I didn't give them any kind of direction. I just said, can you somebody start the conversation for me? And sure enough, without even looking at any posters, any anchor charts, anything, they said, "Oh, the main idea of the both articles, they're both similar because," and they started that main idea of that I. And then another kid raised their hand and they're like, "Oh, I know that because in this article it stated," and they said the first C. And then this next student was like, "Oh, I can piggyback off that and say, this means that." So as they were just going through it on the carpet in 5 minutes, they were able to have those cohesive thoughts that we scaffolded over a longer period of time to transfer into a science lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Interesting stuff, Robin. So,
yes, we could talk about it for hours.
Exactly. But we can't because that old clock on the wall tells us it's time to wrap up another episode of Learn, Teach, Lead, our Friday debrief. We've shared a few lessons, unpacked a few stories, and maybe sparked a few new ideas for your classroom or your leadership journey.
As always, we hope you'll take what you've learned, teach it forward, and lead with purpose. Thanks for spending part of your week with us. We'll see you next time.